Hi, it's Paul from the ESPC Show, and as ever with me is
Megan, and today we are introducing you to this week's episode, which is our longest episode yet.
It's the longest drive as well.
It is. Paul and I hit the road a few months ago and went down to Dumfries and Galloway, and we spoke to a few different members of the community down there. And yeah, without spoiling it too much, we'll just head straight into the episode, but we just wanted to let you know that it is a bumper special, but it's worth every minute.
Indeed.
Hello and welcome back. We're on the road and we are in Dumfries and Galloway just to explore the area. We really wanted to just find out a bit more about life in Dumfries, as that's one of the areas that ESPC covers.
It is.
Yeah, we're just heading into the centre to speak to Scott Mackay at Midsteeple Quarter. So if you are a frequent listener of the podcast, you will remember that we had Mary on the show to talk about town centre living in 20-minute neighbourhoods. One of the case studies that she spoke about was Midsteeple Quarter at Dumfries High Street, so that's who we're away to speak to today. But Paul, I just wanted to ask you while we're en route there,
yes,
what are your expectations of today in Dumfries?
My expectations, I think it's going to be really interesting. Really interested to speak to the guys about the Midsteeple project. They were really interesting when Mary was talking about it. So to go and meet the actual people behind the scheme is great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and then maybe taking a few beauty spots, spot lunch. Yeah. Can't all be about work, can it?
No, exactly, and hopefully avoid the rain, because it has been raining this morning.
It has, but you know, it doesn't take away from the majesty of the place. I'm sure we're going to be absolutely fine.
Yes. So we will catch up with you when we get to Dumfries Town Centre.
We will.
So, Paul, that's us on the high street now.
It is. So we're off to see the Midsteeple Quarter project now. Going to go meet Scott. You know, when I found out there was, I think it's something like 680 members that they've got of the scheme. You know, so they've really galvanised local support, and it has been a real community-led project. So, yeah, really interested to hear more about that. I know they've had crowdfunding for it. They've repurposed these 6 buildings. So, yeah, excited.
Yeah. So we'll catch back up with you when we are with Scott.
So we've arrived. We're at the Midsteeple Quarter project. We're with Scott Mackay, who is Executive Director. We're going to hear a lot more from Scott in a moment. And probably the place to start, Scott, is tell us a little bit about the project. How did it actually begin?
It's difficult to say exactly when it began, because it was part of a conversation that with the local community and the Stove Network, who are an artist collective that became a development trust that actually started in 2011. But throughout really kind of 2015, 16, 17, that conversation got going. It was a lot of engagement with the local community around what is the town, what's the problems with the town, what do the people see as their aspirations for the future of the town, and trying to frame a potential community involvement in trying to turn its fate around, because it was clearly not in a good place. It had been a town where a lot of the properties had been owned by local businesses and families historically. Then through the 80s and 90s, those properties were taken over by funds, investors, because the national chains had moved in and opened up. So that ownership pattern had changed dramatically, and it was no longer owned by local interests. It was owned by external interests. So therefore the capital had essentially been extracted out of the centre of the town, and the only money that was kept in the town was wages, essentially. So it was about how do we actually turn that back around, and the idea of a organisation which was the community in control. Yes. The community owning the buildings, and the community who know best what's good for the town and what they need, being in the decision-making position about what these buildings should be used for.
And we were saying just earlier, this could be a blueprint for other towns up and down the UK, because I think every town has similar challenges, doesn't it? Where you've got those empty units, you've got absent landlords. We still have a housing crisis. So all these things have conspired, really, haven't they? 680 members. I mean, that really is galvanised locally, isn't it? That's real local interest in the project.
Yeah, there is, and we'd like it to be a lot more than that, but it is a good representation of the town, and it shows that there is a real feeling within the town that something has to be done about the state of the high street. There's a real sort of trauma, I call it, of that generational change that's happened to the town, whereas it was. You look at old photographs from the 60s and 70s, and it was thriving, it was busy.
It's sad when you see these.
It's sad, and people are sad and demoralised by that change. And so there is definitely a feeling within the community that they need to do something about it, and if people can get involved to do that, and that's what's happened. It's the community that are doing it. We're all members of the community. It's not somebody coming in from externally to sort it out. It's grassroots. It's like we're going to take this on. Community
led, as you say, and I think so far 6 buildings that you've now got, and we were just talking, weren't we, about what you're going to do with these buildings, and some of it is for residential, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But some is also, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, enterprise space. Do you want to explain what an enterprise space is? Because you were very clear you want to make a distinction between that and retail, don't you?
Yeah, the housing element is very important because that's bringing people back to live in the high street. These buildings, a lot of these historic buildings, because it's a conservation area. Most of the buildings in the high street are over 100 years old, and historically there would have been a lot more people living upper floors and down the closes behind those high street buildings, and there would have been a busy, immediate community living there. So it's about trying to bring that back with the purpose of creating a community, but also that those people are living in the high street and using the services of the high street. So it starts to make
keep the money cycle
going. The enterprise bit, we've been very careful about the use of that word because we wanted to cover a number of things. So it's not primarily retail anymore, as we know, retail's contracting. So we need to look at other uses that are going to be part of sustaining the high street into the future. So enterprise can cover a number of things. It could be new enterprise, new businesses, which could be retail, but retail possibly with something else, some kind of element of maybe education or learning or leisure attached to it. It could be enterprise in terms of creativity. So artists using space for exhibitions, for workshops, for studios. It could be more kind of leisure, cafe, food-led. We enterprise in the sense that it's a positive thing. It's something that's growing, and that it's not necessarily static. So we want to be able to facilitate these spaces, make them available for new startups, incubation of new enterprises. That a lot of people have got an idea. But it's very expensive to take a high street shop. How do you do that? So if we provide it either discounted or free for a certain period, then it can get things up and running. They might take a small space, then it grows into something that becomes bigger. That's the idea of enterprise. So it's about creating that new local economy, getting it going again. And the housing, the rental income from the housing which we own, brings us an income that underpins that financially. So we're not dependent on the leases on the ground floor any longer, which has been how the high street has operated.
Indeed. And you were saying earlier, Scott, just in terms of so these will be properties that will be rented out, but you're talking about mid-market rent here?
Yes, mid-market rent. So it's affordable. It's not at the high end of rented, and we're targeting key workers. So that is another factor in that's where, at the moment anyway, in the town, that's where the market is. There's a lack of quality, affordable rented accommodation, and that is currently an obstacle to recruitment for the likes of the NHS, the local authority, the main employers. People can't find quality accommodation, and there's in the owner, the private owner sector as well. There's a lack of stock. So if somebody coming to the area wanted somewhere to live for the first 6 months, say as they get themselves established, taking on a job, they're really struggling to get accommodation, and that's putting people off. So there's a market there. We're tapping into that market by providing accommodation that meets that market. So that is easy. We're working with the local NHS Trust particularly. They're helping us with how that might look and what their needs are. And key workers is really, at this stage, is what we're focusing on for the renting of these flats.
Yeah. And can I ask, just in terms of the acquisition of these 6 buildings, I know some of this was crowdfunded, but where did the money come from to ultimately?
Yeah, a combination of crowdfunding, which are essentially donations, significant donations from the local public, whether it's £20 here or there to many hundreds of pounds and thousands from some people. Okay. So a real mixture of donations but also some public money in terms of the Scottish Land Fund, that's lottery money actually, Scottish Land Fund. So that helped us acquire some of the buildings too, and also South of Scotland Enterprise, as they were getting set up, they helped us acquire one of the buildings as well. And so there's a real mixture of public money, lottery money, the local donations.
Yeah, got you.
And so if someone is listening to this from another town or another city and thinking that this is the kind of initiative that they'd want to start, they might be wondering, what kind of barriers did you face on the creation of this project and or maybe you've continued to face?
Yeah, it's constant barriers, because the system as it has been set up is failing at the moment. We're looking at market failure. Yeah. So the market's failing, but also the systems that are in place, the legislative systems don't really reflect the current reality. So you've got a conservation area with listed buildings. That's a challenge in itself. It's more expensive to bring these buildings back into use, particularly where many of them have been neglected for a long time. They're not going to meet current standards in terms of thermal efficiency either. That's a big challenge we're trying to deal with from a design perspective. And also you've got your challenges of building control and accessibility. So these are buildings which are over 100 years old. You want to use these first and upper floors for various uses, community uses potentially, but how do you make them accessible to people who don't have the ability to get upstairs? That's another challenge, and building control don't really help with that. No. Because they just will, quite rightly, they say, well, if it's not accessible to the community, then you can't use it for that use. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of these spaces are just not usable anymore. They're not fit for purpose. Planning's a challenge as well. Planning has been very much favoured retail in the high street, and it's been difficult to get a change of use away from retail. That's changed slightly now with the use class changes, so there's more flexibility there, but it's still, I don't think, still doesn't go far enough. And you've got the challenges of residential and how do you simple things, fireproofing, soundproofing, bin storage, practicalities of living in a high street situation are not easy either. Business rates as well are a big challenge. For us to be able to lease a shop unit to a organisation or that's maybe not for profit, how can they afford the business rate? That's a big obstacle. And one of our tenants has actually had to become a charity in order, because financially it just wouldn't work otherwise, which they didn't want to do because they see themselves as a social enterprise. These are the kind of legislative and financial challenges that we have to overcome.
Do you pay business rates on, as we had a little look at your project, the work that you're completing at the moment, did you get exemption for a period of grace as you're doing these things up, or do you pay?
So, well, if there's a listed building, there's an exemption there. While that's a construction site, the phase one that doesn't pay business rates because we don't have anybody in it. But once that's occupied, yes. The tenant will become liable for business rates.
And as you say, if the tenant's not paying any rent, they've still got to find the business rates.
Yes, well, you've got a situation. You've got an empty Debenhams building there now. It's actually a local charity that have occupied that, and so they're exempt because they're a charity. But any tenant looking to take on that big unit like that, they would be out. I believe the numbers have been talked about, over 60,000 in business rates before they even sell anything when they open the doors. And that's a huge challenge. There's good things in planning that are changes as well. So the new National Planning Framework 4 is very much focused on 20-minute neighbourhoods. And I think that is a positive thing for town centres. And our model very much fits with that. So people living back in the centre of the town again and being able to walk or cycle to their day-to-day needs and services without having to get in a car and travel in and commute or whatever. That's good for us. It's good for town centres. But that's going to take a long time to have an effect. And you've got situations where big employers, local authority, they've moved their offices out, or people are now just not wanting to come back to offices or working from home. All of that's a challenge. We should have the main employers or the local authority having their offices right in the centre of the town, like they would have historically. This building that you're in just now was the town hall. Wow. So this would have been an administrative centre for the town hall, for the town a couple of 100 years ago. And that model, in a sense, we need to get back to.
As you say, if you go back to probably the days we all remember with fondness, when you could walk down the high street to your butcher, your baker, maybe your candlestick maker, and those days have gone, and it's because the big box out of town retail units now, and I do feel we need to get local identity back as well, don't we?
Yeah, local identity, that's an interesting one. It's local character and distinctiveness. Yes. So a town like Dumfries, it's got a great conservation here, lovely old buildings. They're not in great shape, most of them, but that is part of that local character of the town. Dumfries is distinctive. It's got many, because of the quarries and the architecture, the red sandstone is part of that character of the town, and that's something that we should celebrate and promote and sort of focus on, as this is different from other towns.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you if you had any advice for anybody in another town thinking about starting a similar kind of community initiative. Would you have any words of wisdom for them?
For us, I think what's made it happen has been that community support that got it off the ground. That, and then in transitioning that into financial support. So using that community support to justify the ask for money, whether that's the ask from the community for donations to get it off the ground, or the ask to the government, local authority for grants. We've created a situation now where the funders can see that there's support there, that it's a long-term view, that it's not just an idea, and that really is a part of the phase one idea of phase one, as well as that
the sort of proof of concept thing.
The proof of concept, exactly.
Is that the hardest part, almost getting the thing to that stage?
I think that was the hardest part, getting it from an idea to a reality. Elements of the community who were supportive right from the early days of the idea, but a lot of people don't believe it until they start seeing it. They're very sceptical. There's been many ideas in the past that have never happened. I'm not going to put any money into that. I'm not going to spend any time supporting that. But now that they can see the scaffolding up and there's a building emerging, people are waking up and thinking, wow, this is actually happening. And we've seen another kind of wave of support on the back of that.
Brilliant. And what's the 3 or 5 year, or maybe it's even longer, what's the long-term plan?
It's really a 15 to 20 year vision. So there is a master plan. So that's another aspect of the kind of building blocks of this whole vision, is a master plan which is actually approved by the council. It's statutory policy in the local development plan. It's planning policy, essentially, that there's a vision that the community lead, which is a mixed use master plan, mix of uses, housing and enterprise uses. And that gives us a status. So when we're asking for funding or there's decisions being made, it's a status that is taken seriously. And that vision is about creating a new community, both a living community in this quarter, so people living in it, but also an enterprising, a working community. So the spaces which are enterprising spaces, that new wealth has been created locally, creating jobs, creating products that will gradually, we hope, grow into a localised economy that turns around the fortunes of the town.
How long till the first building is ready for?
So it's about 2/3 of its way through its construction, so it's programmed currently to be finished at the end of February next year, 2024. So we would hope that by April 24 there'll be people living in it and working in that space.
We've got to come back and see that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Scott, that's been really inspiring. Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
If anyone wants to keep up to date with what you're doing, do you have any social media?
Yeah, we do very much. It's a very important tool for us. So we have we've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. So if you just search for Midsteeple Quarter on any of those formats, you'll find us, and we keep regular updates on there and stories about our members or the team and what's going on. Midsteeplequarter.org is our website, and anyone anywhere, you don't have to live in Dumfries, can sign up and be a member, and you will get a regular newsletter keeping you up to date on what's happening.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. So we're now back in the car. Paul, we're heading out to Gatehouse on Fleet to meet our next guest, but I was wondering what you were thinking of our chat with Scott and just some thoughts.
I mean, the passion came through, didn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the exciting thing is they've got it to that stage now where it's more than just an idea. You know, the proof of concept's almost been proven.
Yeah.
And you know, having a look at the building, and we went around the back and looked at the scale of what they're doing, it's pretty impressive. I think, as you described, the fact that the money, it's all about that, isn't it? The money cycle, the money goes back into the town.
Yeah.
Mid-market rents for tenants. Just there's a fairness about the entire thing, which I think is really inspiring. Yeah, I think it's the model. I think that's the future for many a town.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to, in some ways, what you need is a bunch of like-minded people to take it on.
Yeah, definitely, and there's definitely, I mean, a handful of places already spring to mind of town centres that I'm sure would benefit from that kind of injection of community support. But yeah, so now we're heading off to see Finlay Carson, local MSP for Dumfries and Galloway, and he's really seemed quite excited to speak to us.
I'm sure he's going to be a huge advocate for the place he lives in.
Yeah.
But he's also involved with his community for rural affairs, so it would be good, and the islands, and I think the environment as well. But I think I'd be interested in talking about that, particularly the rural affairs, and you know, we're going a little bit further out now, so it'd be interesting to see, because I often think you drive by these places and you think, what do people do for a living when you live so far out, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think that was why we wanted to speak to Finlay, was just to learn more about why people should live in Dumfries, what it's like to live here, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to hearing what he's got to say.
So, we've arrived, Megan.
Yeah.
Where we arrived to?
We are just outside Gatehouse on Fleet, and we are at Lagan, which is an estate, and we're at the top of a hill, and we'll cut to show you what our view is just now, which is
view is
amazing,
sensational, absolutely lovely.
Yeah, we're away into Gather, which is a bistro, and we're going to go and chat to Finlay Carson MSP.
Yeah, looking forward to chatting to him. Elected 2016, Galloway and West Dumfries is his constituency. As I say, he's the convener for rural affairs, islands and natural environment, so I'm sure he's got a tale to tell. So yeah, and we're going to local lads, so we're going to find out all about that.
So we'll send you now to our chat with Finlay.
So as promised now, we're with Finlay Carson MSP, constituency of Galloway and West Dumfries, want to get that right. Elected in 2016, so you've been in politics a while.
It only seems like yesterday. I was a farmer prior to that, and my brother and I diversified into providing broadband services and things like that to help out our local communities. And only feels like yesterday I entered politics, and I still really don't see myself as a politician. But it's the best job in the world, representing Galloway and West Dumfries. So I'm delighted to still be the MSP and working hard for this constituency. Yeah.
Good for you. And I think we were just talking about this when we finished that you're a local lad, if I can say that. You were born in
Twynham. Yes.
A few miles from here. You still live locally. Did you say you can see your house out the window?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the best views in Dumfries and Galloway, and you can just about see the roof of my house from here. So
I say it's the best job in the world. How would you describe, for people maybe who haven't been to Dumfries and Galloway before, how would you describe it? It's quite diverse, isn't it?
We sometimes get the label of the forgotten part of Scotland. I would prefer to say it's Scotland in miniature. Yeah. We've got everything in Dumfries and Galloway. We've got some of the most wonderful beaches, and that's ranging from rocky cliff type beaches to big sandy beaches like Sandy Hills and whatever. And then we've got some amazing hidden gems like Moss Yard, where you've got the sand and you can fish and boating and whatever. And then only a few yards away you've got the forestry and you've got the hills. So we've got everything here really. It's a wonderful place to live and a wonderful place to visit.
Yeah. And tourism is, we were going to talk about the economy and the local economy. I mean, tourism plays a part, I would imagine, in the local economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Tourism is one of the most important parts, and agriculture. As you can see, it's very much an agricultural area. But hand in hand, they do a lot for the local economy. And we're actually seeing more agri-tourism businesses and food and drink businesses who now look to and enhance the tourist offering by opening up farms.
Local produce, know the provenance of where your food's from, etc.
We see that here, and we're Dumfries and Galloway is also very famous for its butchers. Castle Douglas in particular, there are people who travel miles and miles every weekend to get their meat in Castle Douglas. So that says something. But we've got some amazing bakeries. We've got a smokehouse just along the road here where we get some lovely local produce. Kirkcudbright is very famous as one of the largest, if not the largest, scallop ports in the United Kingdom. And that drives our economy as well. I think the scallop industry is worth something like 55 million.
Wow, that's a lot of scallops.
To the economy. Yep, it is. And you know, they're some of the best scallops in the world, and they're landed and processed in Kirkcudbright. And we've got some amazing seafood. We sometimes forget that when we go to the Mediterranean, quite often the seafood that we get down there could well have come from Kirkcudbright.
Is that right?
So the scallops and the langoustines could well be from right outside our door here.
You wouldn't believe that, would you? I did notice that you're the convener of the Rural Affairs and Islands.
Yes.
I suppose subject matter close to your heart, I would imagine, with your history being in farming.
I'm passionate about rural areas. Islands, there's no inhabited islands in Dumfries and Galloway, but much of the opportunities but also the challenges that islands have, we see here in Dumfries and Galloway. So connectivity, both in terms of transport, but broadband are an issue. But I like to see my job as also looking to the benefits. The attractions of living in a rural area, and how to get over some of the difficulties. So it's a great job. And my background is as a farmer, and living here my whole life gives us a great insight of the challenges that we do have, and they do range from education to health to transport, like anywhere else. But they're unique, unique challenges that you need unique resolution to.
What would be the best bit then of your job?
Oh goodness, I think it is problem solving. We deal with a lot of legislation, and as the convener of a committee in the Scottish Parliament, the role of that committee is to challenge, scrutinise and hold the government to account. So when legislation comes forward, I'm very lucky to have a committee where almost everybody comes from a rural background. They can look at the legislation, just make sure it's fit for purpose and it's doing what it says in the tin.
So it's not just Edinburgh centric and everything just happens in the metropole and we forget about the rural communities.
Yeah, and it is difficult because as you know, the vast bulk of the population live in the central belt.
Glasgow or Edinburgh,
so sometimes rural issues do take a back seat, and we've got to make sure that they realise that some of the solutions for issues in the central belt are just not suitable for rural areas. You know, Scotland has a drug problem. How to address that's different in rural areas than it is in the inner cities. Transport. You know, we are delivering a lot of the solutions to climate change. So agriculture is doing a huge amount to reduce their greenhouse gases. But we have wind turbines. We have hydro. So we're producing lots of green energy. So we need to also make sure that folk in the central belt, who are the main benefactors of that green energy, recognise that rural areas need some attention to lots of opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And we, I mean, it's quite a diverse area. Earlier we were looking at the Midsteeple Quarter project, weren't we?
Yeah, in the town centre, and just how about they're implementing like that circular economy,
community-led initiative,
and that's really important. We've got incredibly strong communities down here. Stranraer in particular, I've got a soft spot for Stranraer. It's seen hard times since the ferry left the centre of the town, but the community spirit across there and the desire for individuals to get off their backsides and do something to help is quite incredible. And we're seeing a lot of money invested in Stranraer, upwards of 11 million to improve the seafront, and Loch Ryan's a fantastic water sports venue, very safe, almost an inland sea, and there's a lovely beachfront in Stranraer as well. So but the community's driving that, and that's the important thing. It's not, we don't like things being done to us.
Well, that's right.
We like to sort of lead them.
I mean, obviously, as you know, ESPC, we're very much in the property sector. We're talking about Dumfries today, and the challenges there about getting people on the ladder, either to rent or to buy. As an MSP, if you had any question to put to the Housing Minister or any advice for the Housing Minister, what would you say for me?
Oh goodness. Well, you talked about being at the Midsteeple Quarter, and I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that we need to see people back living in our town centres. We need thriving town centres, and one of the reasons I think we see them run down compared to what they were a few years ago is there's not people living there anymore. We've had multinationals buy shop fronts, and what were flats, whatever above, have become redundant and neglected. So it's great to see once again community organisations looking to bring people into town centres, and particularly in Dumfries, where it's we call it the university town. We don't have a University of Dumfries, but we have some fantastic further education organisations up at the Crichton, and they're trying to get young people back into the centre. The same in Stranraer, we've seen developments where some derelict buildings have been brought back into use to provide affordable housing for I was going to say startups, but for people who are trying to get their first foot in the ladder. There is often criticism that in areas like this, a lot of the affordable accommodation is snapped up for second homes and for short-term lets. But that is such an important part of our economy as well, and it creates jobs like Lagan. A lot of the people who come here will be people who are staying in cottages.
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it, really?
So it's getting the balance right. So we'd certainly, I would welcome some of the social housing organisations ramping up a little bit when it comes to building social housing in our towns. We have an issue here where if you're made homeless in Stranraer, the chances of getting homeless accommodation in Stranraer is very slim, and you sometimes get moved right across the region. Now again, if you're in the city of Glasgow, you probably can still hop on a bus and get to work, or your kids can still go to the same school. But you can imagine if you find yourself in difficulties with housing in Stranraer and you get moved to Dumfries or Langham, it's, we're talking about 70, 80 miles. And it's not just your house you're losing your support network, your potentially the opportunities to go to your job or your children to stay on at school. So we do have a lack of affordable housing within our towns. And our villages as well. Just like everywhere, public transport is not as good as it might be here. So we do need people living in our villages close to where they can get to school, where they can get to work.
And we heard that today, didn't we? The 20-minute town, everything being within proximity, everything walkable.
But 20-minute towns, that
it's got its negative connotations.
But we could have done that better, and that's something I have discussed with the ministers, that it's a great idea, but the best place for that policy or whatever to be is in a rural area, and it's maybe not 20 minutes or it's maybe not 20 miles, but it's actually to look at the critical mass of services within a community. Now the critical masses within Kirkcudbright are going to be completely different from what they are in Twynham. So for Twynham to be sustainable and whatever, it might need a primary school, it might need a pub, it might need somewhere for people to buy their groceries, and that's it. But in Kirkcudbright we probably need primary school, secondary education, a GP service, access to training, to sports facilities. So I think the whole 20-minute community vision, we should have seen that rolled out in rural areas, and everybody have their bespoke, whether it's 20 or 25 minutes. And that would have returned far more benefits to Dumfries and Galloway than thinking about 20 minutes in Dumfries. Because at the end of the day, most people in villages, it's not a bus every 5 minutes. It's whether they get the bus at 10 o'clock or get it at 1 o'clock or get it at 6 o'clock. And that's the choice. But that doesn't mean to say that a community can't be resilient and sustainable.
And I think we need that. We don't want to end up with everybody living in two big cities in Scotland, do we? That I think we'd all be poorer for that, really.
And we do, as I say, we do have fantastically resilient villages. in communities. But we need recognition that there's now and again we need a little bit more support to ensure the local shop doesn't close, or the local primary school doesn't close. And we see that in some places where people have come together, increased the school role, encouraged new families into the area, and some of the summer communities are really thriving and vibrant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, Finlay, for coming to speak to us today. I think our lunch has just arrived, so we're going to go and tuck into that. But thanks very much, we really appreciate it.
Absolute
chatting.
pleasure.
Thanks, Finlay. Cheers.
Pleasure.
So that's us back in the car now after having our lunch and chat with Finlay Carson. We are now going to head down to Kirkcudbright, where we're going to be meeting Paul Cavers to chat about the local property market. So we'll check back in with you once we're there.
So here we are. We're in the Solway Tide Cafe. We're just going to have a chat with Paul about the property market. Paul, so you're from Cavers & Co. Family business, started in 2004?
2004, yeah.
So nearly 20 years?
Yes, yep.
Seen all sorts of property markets in that time, I would think.
We have, yeah. We've seen all sorts of different scenarios, but but it's good times now, though. So.
I was going to say, I think we'll start with that as the first question then. So how is the market right now?
Yeah, well, ever since the COVID times, when I think just about every area experienced a bit of a boost after that, we've really found that it's really continued on since then.
Yeah.
There were a few sort of signs of things slowing down towards the end of last year, 2022, but we've actually found that the first 6 months of this year have been extremely busy. Similar numbers of properties coming onto the market as last year. I think initially post-COVID it was a lack of supply that was sort of really affecting the market mostly, but we found that this year supply has not really been an issue.
Okay, so nice balance between enough buyers and enough sellers.
Yeah,
wow.
I think so. Yeah,
It doesn't happen often.
It doesn't, no, but I think there was a sort of hesitancy maybe after COVID for people to get their properties on the market, but they've really seen how things have gone in that time. And they're a bit more confident about coming to market now, and that they won't have to wait too long for a sale. So.
Okay, and we were just saying that the search results on ESPC.com for the area are up 2% year on year. Home report views up 2%, total views up 12%. If we went elsewhere, it's different. We're certainly seeing after the frenzy of the sort of post-COVID years, things have calmed down. But let's just say here, things have been steady all along. I mean, you do cover quite a big patch here, don't you? We'll come on to talk about the nature of the buyers in a second, but you were saying it's 25 miles that way?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a big patch, it's a big rural area, so lots of different towns in that patch, and sort of each has their own unique identity, I suppose. But yeah, we cover quite a large area, mostly rural property. Yeah, it's Newton Stewart to the west, and then about as far east as Castle Douglas, Dalbeattie, that sort of area.
Okay, so it's a good long way to go to in the company viewing.
It is, yeah, it can be.
I bet you have to double check the buyer's going to turn up for the viewings. Yeah. Okay, so we were just talking about the market then, the nature of buyers, and we were going to ask you about have interest rates had an impact on the market, and you feel, well, you tell me.
Well, I think we feel we've had some degree of insulation from that. I think traditionally buyers in this area have tended to be cash buyers. We're obviously close to the border, the English border, so a lot of buyers in this area are tending to be of retirement age, looking to retire to the area, maybe having sold their long-term house down south. So
maybe downsizing?
Downsizing. And so they're not, the vast majority here are not buying with mortgages, so we've had that sort of insulation from market pressures of late.
What percentage would you say? Probably an unfair question, but just an approximation of cash?
Off the top of my head, I would say it's around about 80%.
80? Wow, that is significant.
I know. I would say it is that high.
So you can see why interest rate rises are not probably going to impact on. In fact, actually, probably the people with cash and money in the bank may be benefiting from interest rate.
Well, that's true. It maybe gives them that wee bit extra to spend on the furniture.
Well, and what about first-time buyers though? Because they would be impacted. They wouldn't be buying cash, I would imagine.
No, that's true, and we do have some in this area. I think maybe less so than central belt areas. But yeah, we've definitely noticed properties on the sort of lower value end of the market have been a bit slower than others, and I think that probably is the lack of first-time buyers. Equally, people buying to let, perhaps, if they're buying with a mortgage, the buy-to-let purchasers tend to be quite market savvy, and I think they see mortgages as being quite expensive at the moment and are maybe just holding back a bit until things improve.
Yeah.
So.
What sort of price, first-time buyers wise, what price would they be buying at typically in Kirkcudbright? Or what can you get for it?
Yeah, well, in this, certainly in Kirkcudbright anyway, you'd be struggling to get anything much below about 80,000.
Okay.
But the first-time buyer market may be up to sort of 150,000 in this area. So that's the sort of typical range, I would say.
Yeah. But certainly anyone who I'm looking at you, Megan, now off camera. As we know, the Edinburgh market, 80,000. It just wouldn't exist in Edinburgh, would it really? You'd really struggle, I think.
That's a message I would try and convey, is that bargains can be had down here, and I think if you're prepared to look a bit further afield, then I think there is good value for money here. So.
Sounds it, yeah. And are people buying second homes?
Yeah, I think that has been impacted by the increase in additional dwelling supplement as well. It obviously went up towards the end of last year with no warning at all.
No, 6%.
6% we're at now, yeah. So that has had some impact, but equally I think the types of buyers who do tend to buy second homes are maybe a bit more willing to pay that tax, perhaps. It doesn't hold people back.
No,
quite.
Again, it's in the total offering. If they've got cash, it's the total offering, isn't it, between the offer and the ADS. So first time I were looking to get on the ladder, you mentioned that 80,000 is possible in Kirkcudbright. Is there any other spots where it's even less than that? Or?
Well, I think you could find similar prices to that in areas like Castle Douglas, maybe Dalbeattie as well.
Yes.
Once you get over towards Dumfries, it's probably a bit higher than that. Yeah. But you're likely to find some smaller properties in that region as well. So.
Okay. And have those prices sort of stayed steady over the last couple of years? I mean, elsewhere we've seen quite significant rises in some particular types of properties, in certainly the frenzy after COVID. Is that, have you seen?
I would say the sort of prices of properties in that range have been fairly steady over the last few years here, I think. Yeah.
All right, and hotspots, where's the hottest hotspot at the moment?
Right here in Kirkcudbright, I think it's definitely one of them. Well, Kirkcudbright as a town's really booming, I think.
Yes, you get that feel when you walk around.
Yeah, but it's sort of really busy this time of year. Obviously relies a lot on tourism. They've been marketing the artist town branding really well over the last sort of 10 years or more. And that is really going from strength to strength. I've noticed lots of artistic types moving to town, even wanting commercial premises and things. So I think all of that's really added up to making it one of the hotspots of the region. So.
Yeah. And we've been elsewhere today, and we started off in Dumfries talking about a community-based project, and then we were talking to Finlay about saying again about the community taking control and making things happen. And as you say, I imagine around here there's similar things happening, really.
Yeah, well, we've seen that even in Kirkcudbright. There's a former primary school called the Johnston, just slightly out of the centre of town, that was taken over by a community body. So that's now, it's added nursery facilities to the town, a planetarium, a gin distillery, and rooms for hire and things. So all of these are great community assets now. So.
We'll give you a chance to sell Kirkcudbright to the listeners. What would you say?
Yeah, well, for some of the reasons I've already mentioned, the fact that it's booming, I think there's opportunities there for buy-to-let purchasers, because the holiday makers, I think there's
good yield, I would imagine, on the rents, decent rents.
I would say there is, and holiday rentals, I think there's money to be made there, balanced against the types of prices you might pay in somewhere like Edinburgh, for example. That I think there are bargains to be had. But even if you're looking for a place to retire to, then value for money compared with other parts of the country, although demand for property is still relatively high and prices are still increasing comparative to other parts of the country. I still think there's real bargains to be found.
Yeah. And what would you typically pay them for a sort of out-of-town 3-bedroom stone detached?
Prices can range anything from sort of low 200,000s up to over $500,000 in some cases, depending on where it is, what the outlook is, the condition, and so on.
But even at those prices, that seems good value.
Yeah, I think we've had we obviously act for quite a few purchasers in this region as well, and hearing some of the prices that they're getting for just a standard family home in the south of England, and then they come up here and see how far their money goes and what they can get for that. I think they're quite pleasantly surprised by that.
Sure. Can I ask you about you mentioned it there, a transaction where it's a sale in Scotland, a purchase in Scotland and a sale in England. Do people generally tie those two things up because you've got two different legal systems there?
Yeah, they do. They are separate, and we can't act in both transactions.
And I imagine there's an element of education process when an English buyer might come to this come here to buy. I guess you explain that and walk them through the process. Yeah,
and we try and do that at the very earliest opportunity. When we're first meeting the client and talking through the whole process from the offer or negotiation and offers going in right through to completion, and how that might differ from England and what their expectations should be. So.
Arguably a better system in Scotland. Higher satisfaction rates, that's for sure, and more certainty in it earlier on in them. Less sales fall through, that's absolutely certain. That's absolute fact. I mean, certainly 25-30% of sales potentially in England will fall through. Here are 6-7%, so that's something significant there. What would be your outlook, Paul, for the rest of the year then? How do you see the year playing out?
Well, we're pretty positive, I think. Judging by the first 6 months of the year, that we've had a steady number of new instructions for sales. Similar numbers of buyers that we're acting for as well. I think it depends where you get your news, but I think there are sort of equal numbers of stories of possibly interest rates still have some way to go yet. I've read similar stories to say they might, we must be maybe getting near the peak now. So, if we can see these interest rates coming down towards the end of the year, then I think that could be really good for the market. But,
good for sentiment and good for first-time buyers.
Yeah, and as much as we are insulated from it here, ultimately first-time buyers are the start of the chain, so we need that market to be strong too.
We certainly do, yeah, okay. Brilliant, well, thank you, Paul, thank you for your time, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Paul.
All right, my pleasure.
So that was Paul's chat with Paul Cavers.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what struck me is when we were talking to Paul, and I suppose you get conditions to big city prices, not only the price of tea, but the price of property, when he was saying 80,000.
Yeah.
And almost apologising, saying 80,000 for a first-time buyer's property is like, wow.
Yeah, I know.
We just don't see those sort of prices in the centres, as you know. Astonishing to hear 80% of purchases are cash.
Yeah,
That's a really high number, and as he says, a lot of people retiring here and moving here, and probably the interest rates haven't impacted as much.
Yeah, and you can see why people are retiring here.
It's great. I suppose if I had one disappointment, we haven't had enough time to go to all these other places that are on the must-see list. So apologies to everyone that's mentioned places to us, but we only have so much time in the day.
I know, exactly, and we will probably come back down again.
I think so.
This won't be our last visit down to Dumfries and Galloway. If you have liked this episode, please feel free to if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. If you're listening on podcast, remember to subscribe, but you can also send us an email. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode on Dumfries.
Everything but my driving. I did stay over the white lines most of the time, and I was obeying the speed limit.
You can get in touch with us at marketing@espc.com, but otherwise we'll see you again next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.